The national debate on immigration is perhaps being most felt in California, home to nearly a quarter of the nation's undocumented immigrants. That's over 2 million undocumented immigrants, constituting more than 6% of the state's population. What is the impact on education, jobs, social services, and crime? And what about the plight of the Dreamers under DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, the ongoing debate about a path to citizenship, and the state sanctuary policy? We'll ask Laura Hill with the Public Policy Institute of California, Taryn Luna with the Sacramento Bee, and Dan Walters with CalMatters.
Additional funding for the Maddy Report made possible by a grant from The Wonderful Company, harvesting health and happiness around the world. Chevron's Coalinga oil field and Fresno County have been doing side by side for over 100 years. Learn more at doers.com. From the California Channel at the State Capitol and the Maddy Institute, it's the Maddy Report with Executive Director of the Maddy Institute, Mark Keppler.
Welcome. Immigration has been the center of national and state politics for some time now. There's been a lot of commentary, but what are the facts when it comes to immigration and immigration policies? Our guest is Laura Hill from the Nonpartisan Public Policy Institute of California, one of the leading authorities, actually, on immigration issues. Welcome to the Maddy Report.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk numbers. How many undocumented immigrants call California home?
The estimates are between about 2.4 and 2.6 million. And that number is obviously pretty large.
But that's out of a population of, what, 39 million?
That's right. They're about 6% of the population in California. And nationally, there are about 11 million undocumented immigrants.
So it varies from county to county, I assume. So which California counties have the greatest number and the greatest proportion of immigrants, or well, let's say undocumented, specifically undocumented residents?
They actually kind of mirror the counties for immigrants as well. So, you know, our large counties have larger numbers of undocumented immigrants. So Los Angeles County is up there at the top. With
and looking at your statistics, like 804, I think it's 814,000 undocumented. That's quite a large number.
That's right.
Almost a million.
That's right. But as a percentage of the county, it's actually not one of the highest, actually. Monterey and San Benito counties are two counties that are more like 12% of their population is undocumented immigrants, and that's compared to about 6% for the state on average.
And I'm guessing if you look at places like the San Joaquin Valley, it's going to be along those higher numbers.
There are higher percentages in some of those counties, that's right, but the numbers of residents are obviously smaller.
Right, but the percentage is quite large because they are attracted to certain industries like agriculture, for example, and so the numbers will be larger.
That's true, but Santa Clara County is actually right up there with about 10% of the population being undocumented.
Can you explain why that is?
Well, I think Santa Clara County has a lot of the industries that are popular among undocumented immigrants. There's the service work, and there's also construction, and there can be some movement between agricultural settings like in Monterey and San Benito and different kind of hospitality things in Santa Clara.
You know, it's kind of expensive to live there. I'm a little surprised.
It is expensive to live there. I'm not an expert on all of those issues, but definitely you hear stories about overcrowding and substandard housing all over the state.
Or very, very long commutes.
Or very long commutes.
That's right. So it's interesting, reading your materials, that the undocumented population is actually declining since 2007. You know, that probably surprised a lot of people.
It does because they're so popular, such a popular topic in the news these days. But yeah, the population is definitely down from the peak of 2007. And I think there are two things happening. One is fewer undocumented immigrants are coming. That probably started with the Great Recession from 2007 to 2009. There were fewer opportunities for work, and that's really the draw for most undocumented immigrants. And the other thing that's happening is increased deportations, and that's not just a phenomenon with the Trump administration.
That was happening with the Obama administration
as
well.
That's right. That was happening then too.
So where are these undocumented immigrants coming from, to either the U.S. generally or California specifically?
Where in the state are they coming,
No,
where are they coming from?
What nations are they coming from?
So they have largely been coming from Mexico, but recently there's been a little bit of a change. That's still the predominant sending country, but fewer undocumented immigrants from Mexico have been coming lately, and we've seen increases in numbers of undocumented immigrants coming from Central America and Asia. So that means in California right now the percentage of our undocumented immigrants that are from Mexico is around 70%. Nationally it's about 50%, and that's a decline from prior years.
You were mentioning earlier that the reason why undocumented immigrants come here is for economic opportunity, for jobs.
Right.
what percentage of the California workforce are undocumented workers? Are they also attracted, I'm assuming they're attracted to certain industries like ag and construction, et cetera?
Yeah, they're about 9% of the California workforce, and recall they're just about 6% of the California population. And I think that's at least two things happening. One is the reason undocumented immigrants are coming is to work, so we shouldn't be surprised to see them kind of overrepresented in the workforce. And second, undocumented immigrants are prime working age. They're much more likely to be in the 18 to 64 age range than Californians in general.
I'm wondering, how much unemployment exists with undocumented? Is it larger than the normal population, or is it similar? Or?
That's a great question that I can't really answer off the top
It's probably
of my head.
hard to know because they have to report that, right? So that's kind of difficult.
Yeah, so our estimates about undocumented immigrants and participation in the workforce come from national surveys by and large. And so it's pretty hard to get down into the granularity of that in particular regions in California. Certainly, when we look from the flip side at employment and poverty, during the Great Recession, we saw that Latino low-skill immigrants were, behind in terms of earnings, but that's a different thing than saying they were more unemployed.
One of the arguments is that undocumented immigrants are taking, American jobs, quote unquote. Is that true?
Undocumented immigrants are, by and large, quite low-skilled. So many have not graduated from high school, and English is not proficient for them in many cases. And so they're really not competing with most Americans or most Californians for the jobs that those folks are interested in.
Another argument, I'll just end here, we've only got about 20 seconds left in the segment, that is government benefits. One of the arguments is they come here for government benefits. Is that true?
Many California and federal benefits are not available for undocumented immigrants. U.S.-born children of undocumented immigrants are eligible for benefits, but
okay, so it's
they're
kind of bifurcated.
citizens.
Right, it's bifurcated. Okay, very good. Well, up next, we're going to talk about the children brought to the United States by undocumented parents. What happens to those folks? That conversation in a moment. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. I'm Mark Keppler with the Maddy Institute. Many undocumented immigrants live with family members who are legal residents. According to estimates by the Mitigation Policy Institute, more than 5 million children in the U.S. have an undocumented parent. Most of these children, 79%, are U.S. citizens, according to our guest, Laura Hill from the nonpartisan PPIC. So these statistics indicate that a good number of children in California schools come from families with an undocumented immigrant. What are the numbers?
It's about 12.3% of K through 12 school children are undocumented in California, and that's probably over 800,000 students in the state.
And that impacts, I'm guessing, the scores of some of those schools, because these kids are having probably a little more difficult time in school?
We don't look at them separately in any of the data that's collected by the state. Many of them are likely to be English learners. We do have a variety of curriculum in place to help English learners catch up.
And then the state has been focusing on that with the local control funding formula. The governor's made an attempt the legislature and the governor made an attempt to kind of fund those programs more. Let me kind of switch to it. Let's talk about DACA.
Sure.
The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, been in the news a lot lately. Can you briefly describe the program and the number of young people who are affected nationally and also in California?
So nationally, it's about 800,000 young people who have successfully applied for DACA. And in California, it's something like 230,000 that have successfully applied. So again, we're at about a quarter or more of the undocumented immigrants that fall into the DACA category.
A large number.
It is a large number. And the DACA program, what it does is provides a way for young people who came to the United States while children, so before they turn 16, to apply for protection from deportation, and also allows them to be eligible for work permits. So many of these young people were able to come out of the shadows and work and continue their educations. And it's not just those two requirements about age and their arrival and how old they are now, but they also have to demonstrate that they have not committed any kinds of crimes that disqualify them, and they need to have been continuing their educations.
But they have to provide this information. So you said they're coming out of the shadows. They've provided this information, and they're probably wondering, now what? If DACA ends, now the government has all this information. They know that they're here. They're undocumented.
Mm-hmm. I think they're worried for themselves and also for their family members, because many of them are with parents who are likely to still be undocumented.
Yeah, so that gets to the whole issue of this ongoing debate about undocumented immigrants and the path to citizenship. That's been hotly debated. Where are Californians on that issue?
Californians now are in favor of offering a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. I believe it's something like 68% of Californians that have said they favor a path to citizenship. So Californians the state that has the most experience with undocumented immigrants looks a little different from some other parts of the country.
And that, you guys have been polling this for some time. And what's the trend line been over time? Have Californians become more amenable to seeing undocumented have a pathway to citizenship? Has it gone down? Has it just stayed the same?
I think it's been, in recent years, it's been pretty steady. And there are other questions that we've asked about, should there be a way for citizens to for undocumented immigrants to stay in the country? And it's been about 82%. And then this becoming a citizen question is about 68%.
So they're not wanting to kick undocumented immigrants out of the country.
They're not. And in September, the survey actually asked if Californians were in favor of the protections afforded by DACA. And again, a majority of Californians answered that they were, after it had been announced that the plans were to cancel it.
Yeah, because the experience here is different. And also, a lot of these industries rely on it. You also have business groups and ag groups, for example, supporting immigration reform because their workforce comes from there.
And the estimates that we've done in the state show that these are Californians across many, many communities. So these are neighbors, these are schoolmates, these are co-workers.
Are we going to see these issues go away in the near term, or this is going to be continuing on this conversation?
I thought when I started working on the issue, we were close to the end of it, over a decade ago, and it doesn't feel like it.
The last immigration reform was, 1986?
That's right.
Major immigration reform. And
it's been a little while.
That was supposed to solve the issue, and I guess it didn't.
It did not.
So we will be talking about it, it sounds like. Well,
I believe so.
Up next, immigration has been an active issue in the legislature. What passed, what didn't, and why? That conversation in a moment. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. I'm Mark Keppler with the Maddy Institute. Lawmakers at the state capitol spent most of the last year taking shots at immigration policies coming out of Washington, pledging to protect California's undocumented community with legislation of their own. Some were signed into law, some not. Our guest is Taryn with the Sacramento Bee, who has a front row seat, hasn't had a front row seat to the policy debates, and we're delighted to have her join us. Welcome to the Maddy Report.
Thank you for having me.
So the signature law that came out of the Capitol this year was SB 54, the state's sanctuary policy. It was hotly debated. How would it work?
So the state can do very little to curtail federal activities, federal immigration enforcement within California, right? So the general idea is that they're focusing on limiting what state and local police can do and how they can assist the federal government with immigration enforcement. So the bill makes it so that police can't inquire about someone's immigration status, they can't participate in border patrol activities, they can't be deputized as immigration agents, unless someone is wanted on a federal warrant or they have committed one of more than 800 different crimes that are carved out in the bill.
So that was a big addition added by the governor at the governor's insistence. He increased that number of crimes that were covered.
Yeah, there were some 60 crimes that were kind of considered carve-outs initially, so if you committed one of these crimes, then a lot of these protections were kind of wiped away. The governor intervened and expanded that list to over 800 different crimes.
That's quite an expansion.
It is quite an expansion. It was really worried a lot of the advocates who were kind of supporting the bill along the way, and it allows you to notify the federal government if someone's being released and they have committed some of these crimes.
One of those 800 crimes, or if they have a federal warrant.
Yes, exactly.
So there were some groups that were opposed to this. Who were they and why were they opposed?
The main opponent of the bill was the California Sheriff's Association. They largely didn't like the way that they thought it restricted their ability to enforce immigration violations or to help the federal government. They wanted to be able to continue to work on task forces. They argued that by saying that the federal agents couldn't work with them in their jails, that it would then push people out and push them into the streets and go into communities and homes and things like that, and then kind of rounding up people who are generally law-abiding citizens who then, kind of fall through the cracks.
At the end of the day, though, I think it might have been in one of your articles, the head of the California Sheriff's Association said that he thought that the governor dealt with the bulk of the problem when he added these additional laws.
Yeah, so we saw some early amendments that the sheriffs wanted, and it was largely a strikeout of almost the entire bill. In the end, Jerry Brown did remedy a lot of the different things that they wanted, but they still remained opposed. The LA Times at one point had reported that they were working with ICE to kind of oppose the bill and to try to kill the bill. So I think it was kind of a fundamental opposition in a lot of ways.
Okay. So there were other immigration laws that were passed and signed into law. What were some of the other laws that were signed into law this year?
One is AB 450, which keeps federal authorities out of private workplaces unless they have a judicial warrant. Another one, SB 31, was meant to curtail Trump's Muslim registry, which would prohibit public employees from providing information for a registry based on religion, national origin, or ethnicity. Another bill would have made it illegal, or which was passed, made it illegal for landlords to essentially out your immigration status or threaten to out your immigration status.
That's a way for someone, if they were complaining about their apartment or something like that, they say, better not complain or we're going to report you.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the water's leaking or whatnot, when you can't really complain or do a whole lot about it.
There were also some other immigration proposals that were passed by the legislature, but that were not signed into law, or maybe even didn't pass both houses of the legislature. What were some of those that didn't make it?
So some that didn't pass the legislature were kind of interesting. One was meant to kind of stop the border wall by preventing the state from awarding contracts to any company that essentially provided goods or services to the border wall's construction. That didn't even pass the legislature.
It's almost like blackballing those companies. If they get involved and make a bid, then they're out of the equation for state projects.
Yeah, it was a Ricardo Lara bill, and that was kind of the general idea was, if you take on these, you work with federal government for this to build the wall, then you can kind of count out all future state contracts.
Right. Okay. Any other ones that were talked about in the legislature but didn't make it?
Another that didn't pass the legislature would have prohibited the disclosure of information that undocumented immigrants could provide for college grants, driver's license, medical care, and public services, and things like that, which also failed in the legislature.
You think we're going to see more of this in the next year?
I don't get the sense that lawmakers are done here. I think that they'll continue to push next year. Some of these things that didn't pass, they've already promised to bring back in a different form next year.
That happens a lot. They bring it up in 1 year, doesn't make it, but they're dogged about it. They'll bring it back the next year.
The benefit of a 2-year session, yes, you always get a second shot.
There you go. Well, thank you very much. Up next, we're going to talk about immigration politics with veteran political observer Dan Walters of CalMatters. That conversation in a moment. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. I'm Mark Keppler with the Maddy Institute. Given the state's changing demographics, it's no surprise that immigration has become a political hot potato. But does what passes for good politics pass for good policy? We're joined by veteran political observer Dan Walters of CalMatters. Welcome back to the Maddy Report.
Thank you.
So you've written that it's time for Californians to, quote unquote, take a chill pill when it comes to DACA and other immigration issues. Why?
Well, I think it's becoming kind of an obsession with California politicians, and I think it'll become very evident in next year's elections that all you're going to hear is Trump, 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 Trump. And yeah, it plays well, particularly within the Democratic Party, particularly with Democratic Party interest groups. But look, California's got a lot of issues, starting with the housing crisis, for example. And it doesn't really, it's maybe gratifying and emotionally satisfactory to do all this Trump, Trump, Trump stuff, but it doesn't get you there when it's stuff that Trump has nothing to do with housing crisis. He has nothing to do with a lot of the other issues that face California. We still have transportation problems. We still have education problems. We still have water problems. We have all sorts of things going on that have absolutely nothing to do with Donald Trump. And it seems to me that the first responsibility of California politicians is to take care of California's issues and not just posture. Yes, they get lots of national publicity. They get to go on national TV shows. They get to do this and that. But what's that do for California?
Well, the counter would be there's 200,000 Californians that are dreamers, for example, that are affected by DACA. So, and the families that are affected. It impacts
I'm
a lot
not
of
saying
people.
ignore the issue. I'm just saying put it in perspective. And also, it's possible that the militancy in California, particularly on immigration issues, may be counterproductive.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. You talked about the sanctuary state issue, and how that might come back and bite California. How so?
Well, we have to keep our eye on the bottom line. The bottom line of all this should be some sort of immigration reform that makes those folks that are in California and other states illegally, but they're otherwise law-abiding and productive citizens, which there should be some pathway to legalization and perhaps citizenship, and that can only be done by Congress. California can't do that. It can try all it wants to semi-legalize people, but they're not legal until the federal government says they're legal. And by taking the attitude that California has, it kind of invites backlash elsewhere in the country and in Congress. And, you know, you kind of wonder sometimes whether people are waving this bloody shirt just to be waving the bloody shirt, or they're really trying to do something about the issue itself, and that the people who are in the country illegally, undocumented, the dreamers and everyone else, maybe just being pawns in some gigantic political game. But remember, it's real life to them. It really affects their life, and the goal should be to make life easier for them, not to just stir up political angst.
You know, it seems like the immigration issue is something that's dividing business. Business and ag seem to be on one side of that equation, and the Republicans, some of the more populist wings of the Republican Party seem to be on the other side of the issue. Is that going to split the California Republican Party?
More than it's already split? Yes, of course. It is an issue that divides business and agriculture from, I guess, the real true believing red blood red Republicans, I guess we could say. But so that be. I mean, the business and agricultural position reflects the reality. The reality is we have several million undocumented immigrants in California. They play integral roles in the California economy. We would be stuck in many respects, particularly agriculture.
Yeah, you think about agriculture, it's
tourism,
huge.
People who work
construction,
in restaurants, construction, hotels. They're doing jobs that need to be done in the economy that don't pay very much money, and a lot of people are not going to be willing to fill that hole. So let's just recognize it, and I think the business and ag communities see that, and they say, hey, let's get real here, and that is real. Yes, it may divide the Republican Party, but so what? They're divided on all other issues as well.
So the idealists versus the pragmatists, maybe. So this hardline stance that some people in the Republican Party in California are taking, if they continue down that path, are they going to seal the fate of the Republican Party in California for another generation?
More than it's already been sealed? Yeah, I mean, they will. They'll isolate themselves more and more from the California mainstream and become less and less relevant as time goes on. You know, the funny thing is these things turn very quickly. It's only been slightly over 20 years ago that Democrats were worried that the immigration issue was going to backfire on them, and they were scampering to do things like cut off driver's license to illegal immigrants and so forth. So these things turn very quickly, but I think in this particular case, yes, the Republicans are on the wrong side, as it were, and will do nothing but suffer more losses because of it.
You think it's going to temper some of the Republican candidates' positions on immigration as we go to the next election? I mean, they're looking at the demographics of their districts and they're saying, maybe we can't take that hard line.
Well, it already is. You have Republican congressmen from agricultural areas, for example, Mr. Valdeo and so forth, who are already split from the party, I guess the party mainstream on that issue. They see the reality in their own districts. They see the reality in their own political fortunes that Latinos are a large part of their constituency, and they don't want to alienate them. So I mean, you're already seeing that happen quite a bit, as a matter of fact.
Well, I want to thank Dan Walters for CalMatters from joining us, as well as Laura Hill from PPIC and Taryn Luna from the Sacramento Bee. If you want to stay up with state and local politics, you can follow the Maddy Institute on Facebook, Twitter, or log on to our website at maddyinstitute.org. This is Mark Keppler for the Maddy Report. Thanks for joining us.
The views expressed in the Maddy Report are those of the individuals participating in the program and do not necessarily reflect those of the California Channel or the Maddy Institute.